Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Runeterra Report, Mastering Runeterra's podcast, filling you in on everything you'll need to know for the upcoming week of Runeterra at a breakneck pace. I'm your host, Darwin, NA Masters player, here to guide you through the meta for the week of April 3rd, 2023. Without any further ado, let's dive right in and explore what you'll have to keep an eye on for this week of Runeterra. We've got a new season to explore, my friends. This week's report will be a tad bit shorter, since we're currently figuring out the strongest ways to actually build out each of these new potent deck concepts, and I'll largely be focusing on the 3 new champions. These new champions have found varying degrees of success, and we'll talk about each of them in turn. Noxus Aggro has a new flavor at last. With many staples being rotated out of the standard format, Samira has arrived to reconstruct the go-face stratagems that we all know and tolerate. Her pairing with Fizz has been by far the most successful thus far, with many high-level players believing it to be this patch's tier 0 option to climb the ladder. She's also been included in Targon lists alongside Leona, reminiscent of the old favorite Sunburn, and while they have substantially lower play rates, their win rates are obscene. The play patterns are maybe a bit less complex and nuanced, but Targon Samira seems to be a very potent counter to the Bilgewater variations of the deck. Samira Fizz is a potent aggro combo deck, but actually really struggles with decks that can outpace it and kill it first. It really punishes slow decks that can't cut off its overwhelming pressure before it gets rolling. Stats are still very new, but for the Bilgewater variation of Samira, Powder Pandemonium seems to be an underrated but very potent finisher. Having played against it a few times myself, I can confirm that there will be some nutty hands once you've lost control of the board and you're trying to close out the game. It's not uncommon to have more stacks of Powder Pandemonium than you have slots on the board and burn Powder Monkeys. As for the Targon version, Pale Cascade is a great card to cycle and protect units as it's been since release. Pirouette synergizes very well with the stun-heavy game plan of the Daybreak package, and it can act as either a plunder payoff or a plunder enabler because of its cheap cost. I also like the idea behind this Morning Light inclusion. While it doesn't stop fast speed board sweeps like Mischievous Mirai Caustic Riff, it can still give your units a nice added bit of durability, and some extra damage for their big wide swings. Samira's best lineup partners want to also target slower decks. She shares very similar matchup spreads with Gwen Quinn and Lurk, and those are probably going to be the best options to throw alongside her for the time being. And on to the second most successful champ of the expansion thus far. Surprisingly, it's Sett? Huh. Okay, he only really has one good deck, that being his pairing with Karma in Ionia, but I do believe we'll find more opportunities to include the boss in lists as time goes on. Karma Sett absolutely crushes other Piltover and Zon decks, but sometimes struggles to deal with overwhelming pressure from strategies like the aforementioned Lurk, Hallowed Demacia, and Samira. People have tried Karma Sett in other configurations, such as Targon, Freljord, and PNZ with other champions, but I'd recommend sticking to the established list for the time being if you just want to win games. This is another one of those decks with a very scattered card spread, so you can kind of try whatever you want, but I do really like this augmented Clockling. This card is basically the Piltover and Zon equivalent to Zap's Sprayfin, and if you played before rotation, you all remember how much of a staple Zap was in most Bilgewater decks. Clockling's predict, draw, and discount effect can give you a clutch smell right when you need it, and you'll never turn your nose up at an elusive blocker with all these damn Samira decks on the loose. Acorn and Aftershock appear to also be strong options worth taking a look at. When building a lineup around Sett Karma, great care should be taken. You lose super hard to Samira and all of her best partners, and I expect that the aforementioned Samira, Hallowed Demacia, and Lurk lineup will be very popular. If you're simply praying that you don't run into this lineup and you don't care about hedging against them, I would say Deep and some version of Aatrox will be your best partners. Decks that also have a lot of inevitability and generally aren't too scared of most Piltover and Zon lists. Sett has ended up in drastically different deck lists from the mid-range beatdown that we envisioned upon seeing his reveal, but I do think the Big Vastaya will remain a force to be reckoned with, and will become infinitely scarier if Samira starts to drop out of prominence. Last, and unfortunately currently least, is my favorite champion of the expansion, the new Legends of Runeterra exclusive, Jack. This guy looked absolutely mega busted on reveal, but he has yet to really make a splash. His best deck is Seraphine Jack, which I do believe is stronger than the stats would indicate, but he's basically a Badger Bear in that deck. He's a beat stick, he can block twice, he'll actually generate you a little bit of value from striking with his coins, but he isn't necessarily what makes the whole thing tick. That being said, Seraphine Jack Bar has been my absolute favorite laddering deck early into the season, and I do believe that it's stronger than the 47% win rate would indicate. Mischievous Mirai is a seriously busted card, and we're now finally seeing that properly come to fruition. As with all Seraphine decks, there are plenty of wacky one-of options that you could try. My favorites listed here are Eye of Nagakiburos, Risky Venture, and Parley. Risky Venture and Parley are inherently risky cards that are vulnerable to counterplay, but they can have very strong payoffs. Seraphine and Jack actually target Fizz Samira. Mischievous Mirai plus Caustic Rift leaves that deck with basically no counterplay. They can't easily remove the kegs, and Fizz can't disable a spell like Rift because it doesn't actually target anything. Annie Caitlin is probably the single best pairing for Jack Seraphine, targeting Fizz Samira and Ashe Noxus very well. Aside from that, Lurk is probably going to be your best bet to win those matchups, and if you're really going all in on killing Fizz and Samira, Elites will also serve you well. While Jack has not found much success yet, I do think this combo with Seraphine has a lot farther to go, and I think Jack will end up surprising a lot of folks once the dust settles. And that's the meat and potatoes of the episode out of the way, the new champions, but when it comes to other decks at the top of the meta, there are a few old dogs that have come back with a vengeance after their predators were rotated out of existence. Deep, Ashe Noxus, and multiple variants of Aatrox look to be the strongest decks that A, don't have any new pieces, but B, also weren't at the top of the meta before the patch. They're coming back from a long time ago. Ashe should be paired with Lurk or Heimer Jace to target some strong Demacia lineups. Deep is very polarizing and hopes to crush slow decks like Aatrox, Seraphine, and Karma, whilst avoiding Samira and aggressive decks like Lurk and Hallowed Demacia. Pair it with Karma Sett and Aatrox for your best results. Aatrox Kayn and Aatrox Demacia are not completely identical, but they do share a similar goal in lineup building. Crush slow Piltover and Zon decks and pray for no Samira or Gwen. As stated previously, it forms a nice natural lineup with Karma Sett and Deep. There are also some decks from just before the patch that are still strong despite the rotation, namely Gwen Quinn, Lurk, Elites, and Heimer Jace. Gwen Quinn is very strong with only a few bad matchups, and it can form the core of a very solid lineup, working best alongside Samira and Lurk, but very functional in other lineups as well. Lurk would like to avoid Hallowed and Targon Samira as much as possible, but it goes even with or dominates basically everything else in the meta. Elites are the best answer to Fizz Samira, and any lineup targeting that aggressive combo deck first and foremost should begin and end with the Demacian army. Pair Elites with Gwen Quinn and either Jack Seraphine or Samira Targon to crush the Bilgewater version of Samira. Heimer Jace, as per usual, is best targeting mid-range decks that are weak to efficient removal. Throwing it in a pot alongside Lurk and Deep should turn out decently to target decks like Ashe, Elites, and Deep itself. And with most of the meta covered for the time being, it's about that time again, my friends. Welcome back to the Radioactive Hazard Pile, where your LP goes to die. The biggest bait of the patch is undeniably traps. Flashbomb Peddler is a cute card, and I'm glad the Puffcat Peddler finally has a rival, but this guy doesn't seem keen on peddling you any favorable matchups. The deck is stuck at 45% win rate after all. Jack Sett was the first thing that I tried when the patch hit, as did many others, and well, we all quickly realized that we should never do it again. I don't think that deck's crossed 40% win rate even once since the patch hit. The concept just doesn't work. As stated previously, Karma and Sett should be paired together, but not outside of Piltover and Zon. Ginny seems to be dying horribly with some of its cards rotated out, and it likely won't take the spotlight again until we see some new cards with decent skills enter the meta. Losing Doombeast and Decimate in particular really crippled this deck. Oh, and don't play Rise. Please. He's back to his old ways. It's probably best that it stays that way. We all saw what happened when he was meta. Let's just stop playing him. Let's pretend this game has one less champ than it does. Thanks, guys. Well, my friends, that'll be just about everything for this week's Runeterra Report here on Mastering Runeterra. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening until the end. If you have any questions or concerns about the podcast, please feel free to hit me up through the Mastering Runeterra Discord server or personally at Darwin Theory 9305. Massive shoutouts to masteringruneterra.com for making this happen, as well as every individual affiliated with the site who helped me piece together the data needed for this podcast. Other special shoutouts go to the folks behind LOR.GG, as well as Legna's website for matchup data. Gathering data isn't easy, but when I can cross-reference with such reliable sources, it's a massive help to make sure I know what I'm talking about is correct. The folks at Mastering Runeterra post quite often, so if you aren't already a regular, I'd highly recommend you swing by and see what's in store. We've got meta tier lists, matchup spreads, and a best of 3 ban helper for all you tournament players out there, all updated every few hours to make sure that we've got the best data out there. We also have articles posted by top players who know their stuff nearly every single day, so you'll be sure to find something you like no matter where you look. This has been Darwin, and on behalf of everyone at Mastering Runeterra, I'd like to thank you for tuning in and wish you all a successful week of laddering. I hope to see you on our next episode, once the meta has settled down a little bit more and we can see if some of these early successes were simple flukes or if they were meant to last. Happy climbing!